What separates high achievers from those who struggle to get ahead? This is the Leaders of Transformation podcast. And on this show, we interview difference makers and world changers who are disrupting for good. I'm your host, Nicole Jansen, and our guest today is Joel Green. Now, Joel is a man that can tackle this question head on. You know, he's been a successful leader, a former professional basketball player, and many would define him by his successes, but it is what he did to achieve that success that he's most interested in sharing with others. He is the founder of Pro Level Training. He is the national director of the Nike Sports Camps, and he's an accomplished TEDx speaker. His first book releases this week. It's called Filtering: The Way to Extract Strength from the Struggle. And today we're going to talk about his book. We're specifically going to talk about what separates high achievers from non-achievers so that you can reach new levels of fulfillment, accomplishment, and impact in your own life. Now, before we do that, I always love giving a shout out to those people who are supporting the show with amazing guests. And so a shout out to Erica from Deverio Creative Group for introducing me to Joel. Thank you, Erica. We really appreciate you. One last thing is this podcast is actually brought to you by my training and coaching company. And so if you are a leader who wants to be better, do better, make a greater impact, then book a free consultation with me and we can discuss your goals, your challenges, and the breakthrough necessary in order for you to become the leader of transformation that you're capable of being. And you can do that at leadersoftransformation.com/coaching. There's a scheduling link provided. All right, let's bring our guest on. Joel, welcome to Leaders of Transformation. We're excited to have you here today.
Nicole, thanks so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. And congratulations on your new book. I've read it. It's awesome. We get a chance to get to know you, and also, of course, like I just shared, the backstory of not just, hey, I created all this success, but how did I get there? And so when you wrote this book, who did you actually write it for? Did you have a specific audience in mind?
Well, absolutely. I mean, there's so many people out there that, desire is one thing, but gets the other thing, and I really wrote it for them to where I can help them to persevere, beyond the random hiccups of life that honestly we all experience. So I wrote it for, myself initially, and then I said, okay, this is going to help so many other people. And I just began putting everybody else in mind as I wrote the book, and just realized this is going to help so many people persevere and just, just not just get over different things in their lives, but to also see the beauty of life, while things may not appear beautiful on the surface. And that's the whole, filtering process to really help them to pull the good and the great out of the things that don't seem so good or great. And so those who are pretty much who I wrote it for.
Well, I think a lot of people can relate to that, especially now with the last couple of years being pretty tumultuous for a lot of people in terms of, and for some, I noticed that like this is the first real extreme adversity that they've experienced. And so they're like, what do I do with this? I know for myself, I kind of experienced it a little differently because I was like, oh, okay, here we go. Because I had some familiar, past experience in this way. And so, which you have as well, from what I read in the book. So tell us a little bit about how you developed this and kind of the backstory, of your own need to filter.
Well, again, from my own backstory, just, growing up in very humble conditions and surroundings, growing up in an abandoned home and being around violence early on at 6 years old, being really close to a shooting, afraid I was going to get shot, and having weapons pulled out on me before the age of 10, going through these different things and losing a sibling and stuff like that, I had to come up with a way to keep moving forward. I literally had to come up with a way. And, over the years, I would practice what I ended up writing about probably close to 20 years later. With filtering is something that I was doing intentionally for myself as a teenager, right around 18, 19 years old, soon after my brother had passed away, and just trying to intentionally come up with a way to use what happened to me to my advantage. And I wrote things down as a teenager, saying, all right, cool. You mad about this? Take it, put it on the court. And I would just, draw every bit of energy I had from the sadness, from the anger, from my, happiness, anything that I felt gave me energy. I utilized it, and I used to put it on the court as an athlete, and I utilized it and put it in the classroom as a student, and it helped me literally in every angle and aspect of my life. So um, I was afraid to write for a long time. I didn't know how to really write a book, but once I figured it out, and it's funny you mentioned the pandemic. Once the pandemic happened, I had so much time on my hands. I said, I have to get this done now. And I got a bit more serious about finishing it. I've been writing it for 6 years, and I made sure I had to finish it during the pandemic. But so much of what I went through early in life, it just made me filter, what I was going through, just to make sure I can get beyond it.
I started off by saying, what's the difference between high achievers and those that struggle to get ahead? And you say something very interesting. You said, I had to do this. And that's true for your life. You said, I had to do this, but there's a lot of people that don't, right? So things happen to them and they take that victim mentality. And I've been there too, right? Why me? Why is this happening to me? And so they don't do this. Maybe it's because they didn't learn it, maybe because they didn't have a mentor that helped them with that, or something inside you caused you to do this. And maybe it's because you were already on the basketball court and developing discipline there. But talk a little bit about the difference between how people, because I'm sure with also the camps that you work with a lot of kids and so forth,
Mhm.
there are some that just don't and some that do. What's the difference?
Well, exactly what you said, as far as me saying that I had to do it. I don't like a lot of options, to be honest with you. If I want something or desire something in life, again, it's in the book, I really chase it down as if I have to have it, as if I need it. And by way of doing that, I cut out a lot of options. I may start off brainstorming and list 5 or 6 things to do or pursue. At the end of it all, I give myself one. Even two is too many sometimes. And, that second option may be a way out. And I don't want a way out. If I'm going to desire to go after something, I have to go full force with my attempt of it, or I won't be pleased with myself knowing that I went at it with the intent of, just in case this doesn't go right, at least I have the other. I don't want any other option. And that's where I began. And again, I wrote about it, a method that I call the now method, which is no other way. That's what I tell myself. Look, if this is what you want, don't play yourself out of position by giving yourself a way out. So I believe that's when it comes to higher achievers. High achievers, they lock in, they put blinders on, and they say, this is what I'm going to get done, or this is what I'm going to get done, simply put.
Yeah. So I'm trying to extract, I guess, some of the like what's underneath that. Is there a confidence that you have in yourself and your ability to do it, or is it a
Mm.
confidence in the ability to figure it out, to work harder than others? Like, what's the belief that drives that?
I think the root of it is the fact that I'm so fine and so okay with being imperfect. I
Mm,
know that we make mistakes. I think the majority of people don't pursue different things because they're afraid to look bad, they're afraid to fail, they're afraid to mess up, they're afraid what people think, you know, especially nowadays, because everything
yeah.
is publicized by way of social media. They don't want to put anything out there and put themselves out there in front of hundreds of people in their circle or thousands potentially and look bad. I don't care. For me, I don't care what people think when it comes to me doing something that I feel will benefit my life, my family's lives, or the lives of other people. So I'm going to go after it. I've messed up enough in life, and I've seen so much of the imperfect side of life by this point, but have gotten beyond that and realized there's always beauty on the other side, to where I don't mind an imperfect moment. So if this pursuit ends up being imperfect, cool. It's gonna be some beauty after this. And for me, that's just really what it boils down to. It's not that I work harder than everybody else. It's not about that. But I do fear less than a lot of other people. I don't have many fears when it comes to failures and potential mishaps. That doesn't scare me. So that's the thing that holds a lot of people back, is the potential of what may happen. I want to see what might happen. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
for me, it's not that I outwork everybody, but I don't have much that holds me back from trying.
I love what you said there now and no other way. It's living in that. What I'm hearing in that is living in the present. So often people are living in the past, worrying
Exactly.
about what was, or the good old days, or had they done this, shoulda, coulda, woulda, um, or they're looking at the future and what could happen and the
Exactly.
fear. And you're just what I'm hearing is you're just in the now and saying like, I know what I can do now,
Yep.
and I'm going to do this right now, and move forward from there. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because this fear of failure, I mean, fear of success stops people as well.
Absolutely.
But this fear of failure and the fear of what you mentioned about like what people might think, I think about from a focus, and you talk about in your book the importance of focus is how important. You were talking about it earlier. It's like having this one way. It's like this singular focus, as my dad used to call laser focus, and laser focus, like a laser can literally cut through steel. But when that focus gets diffused, sure, it might light a room, but it's not going to burn through steel, right? It's the same light, it's the same energy, it's just in a different concentration. And so when you talk about focus, if people are focused on uh, fear of what might happen, that's focus that's not placed, and energy that's not placed on actually moving them forward. So they're using the energy. What I'm hearing is like you just were so focused, you put all of that energy into one direction as
Yep.
opposed to diffusing it forward, backward, all
Exactly.
over,
Exactly.
and moving forward. So just trying to extract some of those things. And I find oftentimes when I'm talking to people that are high achievers, which is most of the people that I'm talking to, is that it's like there's an unconscious competence to what they do, you
Absolutely.
know?
Yep.
And I love in your book where you unpack a little bit of that. It's like, here's the things that I do, and this is why I do it this way, and how it works and so forth. So let's talk about, in particular, I think about emotions and how emotions can run high. And you've been in situations like that, and you talk about in your book about that calm, being able to stay calm in the midst of that. How do you filter it when you're in it? Like it's all crazy is happening around you, which is kind of like what's happening in the world for a lot.
Right.
It's
Right.
like there's all this crazy going around. How do you filter and focus in on the thing that's most important?
It's I may make it sound really simple, but it's an awareness. And that's just the main thing. For me, what I've seen with myself, and I'm sure so many, of your viewers can attest to it, is that it's we get caught up in the emotions of our moment, right? And we get so caught up in the emotions of our moment that it clouds our awareness, it clouds our judgment to where we don't really know everything that's going on. We're not able to see ourselves objectively. We're just reacting to something. And if we're reacting, that means that something is controlling us in that moment. So we lose so much in that at that point in time. So for me, I intentionally make sure I'm aware, so I prep myself, by using this method, this practice of filtering. I'm prepared for the next thing, not in a pessimistic way, but I'm just giving myself some protocol for life, saying, okay, when this thing occurs, when I'm in a moment of high tension, high intensity, you know, violence potentially, whatever the case is, attack or feeling threatened, I can take a breath for a moment. I can, I can give myself a second or two and try to gather my thoughts. I can think, over 10, 15 thoughts in a matter of seconds. So it's really an awareness of knowing what I'm involved in at that moment. And that's what allows me to filter that moment right then and there and not wait for that moment to pass and say, oh man, I should have did X, Y, Z. So that's something I've practiced, and it hasn't been easy because I've had to apply it during difficult moments. But I've realized it has helped me out extremely, just to say, okay, let me lean into this as opposed to run from this because that might be my default thought. I've had to go against my default thinking plenty of times when it comes to filtering because by default, I'm thinking, oh, bail or go back and attack back. But then I realize that thing that, again, I'm attacking is controlling me, is making me do what they want me to do. So You know, it's an awareness, to be honest, just to know what's in front of you at that moment. And the moment you begin to practice this awareness, you know, by way of the filtering method, breaking things down while they're happening, brainstorming on them, leaning into them, and not trying to ignore them as if they're not happening, that's when it unlocks so much for you in the moments that you're going through while you're going through them.
So give us an example from your life. Like, when have you had to do that, and how you actually walk through it, giving us an idea of this protocol that you're talking about?
Great example is this. So, say even a recent example. So, a few years ago, maybe 3 to 4 years ago, I got divorced. So that was a huge one for me. That was a tough one for me. I'll say that. It was a tough one for me. I was writing the book during that time already, and so I was already practicing filtering intentionally again. I was doing it since I was a teenager, but with no true framework. But in recent years, I've been practicing it and just really trying to make sure that emotionally I can stay strong, and no matter what's going on around me, no matter the turmoil, no matter the distress, the depression that tries to seep in, that I can still stay on track, that I can still stay focused, I can still succeed, I can still be an amazing father, no matter what. And I pulled it off. It was a very difficult time for me, for my family, for my son. That was the toughest part, and I had to just stay focused. I had to lean into it and realize what I was going through wouldn't last forever. That was the first thing I had to tell myself. I know I don't like this moment, but it's not going to last forever. And I came up with that by just filtering the moment, saying, okay, this sucks, but I didn't want it to happen. So I'm like, okay, what can I draw from this right now to help myself and those around me better? How can I help it make my son better at this moment? So for myself, I continue to tell myself, okay, just look beyond it for a moment. Look beyond it and see where you're going to be. See yourself happy, because you're not that happy right now. You don't feel too fulfilled right now from what's taking place, but see yourself in that place. And once I was there, I did this backtracking method to where it said, okay, well, what made me happy? And I just began utilizing my imagination like a little kid, and just begin looking and say, okay, well, this probably can make me happy by that time, a year or two from now, or months from now. And I just began doing things that made me happy, that made me glad, and just extracting every bit of good that I could from it. And from the sadness that I had, I used that energy and I applied it toward work. I didn't overwork myself, but I said, okay, let me use this sadness that's keeping me up at night. Let's apply it somewhere. And instead of just staying up crying, I stayed up and built a major part of the business, and I began writing a lot more of the book at that time. Like I said, I didn't finish it till during the pandemic, but that I would say that was probably the most recent example, major example rather, to where I really had to apply filtering and breaking down my situations in a major way to extract some beauty from it and find some seeds of growth within it.
Yeah, I can relate to that. Having gotten divorced a few years back, probably around the same time, and it's so easy to get stuck in it, and like you talk about the sadness, getting stuck in that feeling, and you mentioned something which I think is really important, is to tell yourself that you're not always going to be in that situation, not always going to feel that way. Because I've actually had clients who have said, I feel like I'll always be this way, or I feel like I will never find the person that I'm going to be spend my life with. And this always or never, we globalize. We have a tendency as human beings to globalize the negative and minimize the positive. Something bad happens, it's like, oh, this is a statement of my life, or this is, you know, why has this always happened to me? And when it's a positive thing, then we look at it like, oh, I got lucky. I
Mhm.
got lucky. And we
Right.
diminish that we diminish our impact, our confidence, our power. People wonder why they don't have
Big time.
confidence. And it's all in what we're saying. And I'm hearing that from your perspective. It's like you just have a different approach. And then the vision, of course, the Bible
Mhm.
says, without vision, people perish.
People perish. Exactly.
So.
And it also helped me going through what I went through. It helped me to see, what I say, the beauty of a broken heart. And it's something that I wrote down. It's not in the book. So maybe this would be written somewhere else, but I was just saying that the beauty of a broken heart is the fact that if you visualize a broken heart, it's open. And that's the beauty that I found in having a broken heart. It opened my heart. It opened me up. I may have been a little bit closed-minded in different areas, closed-hearted in different areas, but then I opened myself up to help, to reaching out to other people and saying, hey, look, here's where I'm insecure. Can you help me out? And it just helped me be so secure with being insecure, and just being human, to where I was very to myself before, but the beauty of that broken heart was the fact that it was open, and as it mended back together, it mended back even stronger.
Yeah. Yeah, I can attest to that. I love that, the beauty of a broken heart. It's like God was able to work through it and to heal the broken parts of it. It's like what there's a saying, right? What falls to, things fall apart so that they fall together.
Fall together, exactly.
Yeah. So that's good. So what would you tell for those that are in that space right now? And we've talked about a bunch of these different things, but like kind of bringing it into I know it's different for everybody, but the sort of this process, this protocol, like you're talking about, somebody that is struggling and feels like they can't get ahead. They feel like they're stuck, or life is happening to them, and how do they make that shift and use your filtering process to be able to get out of it? Like, what do they do right now? What do they do today? What are their daily habits that they can even just to create that sustainable progress?
I would say just really, leaning into where they feel stuck. Again, by default, so many people may want to stray from, run from things like that. And, that's often due to ignorance many times, not knowing about what they're fearing or not knowing about where they're stuck. Because so many times knowledge will get us unstuck. But we get so caught up in, just the moment, emotionally, to where we don't know how to act or react.
So we're
And if we
too in it, or we try to avoid it.
exactly, right. So if we just allow ourselves to learn a little bit more, reach out to others, that'll help us so much. That'll help us get unstuck and humble ourselves before life humbles us too much. And that's a huge thing, to where I'm very aware and conscious of that. I humble myself as much as I can before God has to humble me, or life has to humble me, because that's a different level of humility that you gain. So it's a lot of things that can help people get unstuck, as far as, again, reaching out to other people. That transparency is amazing. And once I realized that, it turned everything around.
What about guilt? How do you filter guilt?
That's a big one. As far as just the guilt, it shows that you're alive. Number one, you're human. You have emotions. You care. If you're guilty about anything, it shows that you have a heart, in my opinion. And that's a major thing right there in itself, to where people, have to just say, okay, I did this. I'm not fine with it. But again, just like we discussed earlier, there's something beyond this. There's tomorrow. There's time beyond this moment for change. So if you feel guilty, begin to focus on the change at that point in time. And that's where I would tell anybody, it really is about your perspective, where you put your focus. That's where your energy is going to follow. So, focus on the change of what you feel guilty about. And no matter what people think, you're changing.
Yeah. So let's talk about your goals program and a little bit about what you do with those camps and pro level training, and how that all applies to this. Like, how do you take this when we're talking about filtering, and even filtering some of the most difficult things that we've experienced in life, and how do you turn it into something like on the court with kids, and help them to really become, successful leaders? Because I know you teach leadership skills.
Well, I mean, from my end, I realize when it comes to leadership, when it comes to success, it's you have to be intentional about it. And that's one thing throughout my athletic career. I was very, very intentional about being successful. And fortunately, I was able to gain a good amount of success as an athlete, and that's what I try to relay to the kids that I work with, the youth, letting them know this is not going to just happen for you. Nothing in life is not about luck. It's not osmosis. Those that really gets ahead and has longevity with once they get ahead, that's by intent. Some things may happen by what we call luck or by osmosis, by happenstance, but those things rarely last. So I tell the kids all the time, you have to set some goals for yourself. That's why I set up the goals program and giving our athletes leadership skills. It's a very near and dear thing to me. And an example that I give them so they can really bring things home from the start of our sit down is I'll tell different athletes to envision their sports with no goals, no physical goals. Basketball players, you have no hoop. Soccer, lacrosse, hockey, you have no net. Football players, you have no goal line or field goal post. And if they didn't have these goals, they would literally have nothing to aim for out on their fields and on their courts or on the ice. And it's the same way in life, I tell them, to where if you don't have any goals, you have nothing to aim for. You're just wandering around aimlessly on those fields of life. And, it helps them to realize really quick, like, okay, wow, I need to have something to shoot for on the day-to-day, the week-to-week, and month-to-month basis so that I feel like I'm being fulfilled. I feel like I'm being successful at this sport called life. I mean, this is bigger than sport. So, that's one of the main things I look to hammer home with those athletes.
So that brings me actually to this pyramid of desire. I printed it out from your book, of course, because I got a pre-copy of your book. And need, want, wish. Can you quickly walk us through this? I think this is really simple but powerful. And it's kind of like you said about the awareness, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Right.
transformation, we talk about transformation on this show. Transformation begins with awareness. It's awareness. Mm-hmm. Then it's a choice. What am I going to do with that awareness? And then it is actually taking the action and doing something, to follow through with that. And so here, again, one of those things, it's like need, want, wish. And we use a lot of these words even interchangeably, but they're very distinct. So talk about that.
Exactly. And that's exactly why I wanted to highlight it, because there's huge differences. We use them, like I said, interchangeably, but there's major differences with those words. And, we say that we want everything, but it's like, at what level, do you desire that? I like to say desire a lot of times now because I'm like, I do not want to say that I want things all the time. Again, I don't care that often what people think about me. So if I say I need a certain thing, I mean it, so that I can at least convince myself that I'm going to go after it as if it's a necessity. Because it's a rare occasion I don't get what I go after that hard, at that to that level. But as far as the pyramid of desire, I always tell people that wishful level, I stay away from it, and I try to help people to stay away from that wishful level of desire because it can actually still lead to quite a bit of disappointment, because you're speaking on this thing that you desire or you say you want, but you don't really want it that bad, but there's a part of you that still wants the end result of that desire. And when you don't get it, you're pretty upset, but
and you don't get it because you don't actually put the energy to achieve
exactly.
it. Yeah.
Right. And those can lead to that 1 to 2 day of depression moments that you may have. Again, that depression, that upset won't last for too long. But why have that come about at all? And the want level, that's the major one. That's the meat of the sandwich right there, because that's what we all say all the time. I want that. I want this. I want that. I want the car. I want the house. I want that person. We want all these things, but we don't realize the fact that we're not saying that we need those things, that we're not going to go after them as hard. Like, we're going to pursue them a little bit, we're going to give 60, but expect 100. And that's when we fool ourselves. And it's like, you want to get even beyond that want level of desire, because if you know that you truly would like that thing, like if you truly desire, you have to watch your words, watch what you speak, because you'll believe it. Like that's
Yeah.
your subconscious will take it in and you'll follow exactly what you spoke. And so I tell people, look, you have to change your language and convert those wants over to a need. Go from that wish, make that wish maybe into a want at some point if it's not that important, but it's something that you would still like to experience. All right, cool, no problem. But don't really desire something and say that you want something. If you really desire something, you have to move that thing up the pyramid and say you need it.
Yeah.
And that's when you really pursue something as honestly as if you have to have it, as if your life depends on it. And I've had people tell me, oh, it's not that deep, it's not that serious. You're overachieving, you're doing too much. But they're not me, and that's the thing that a lot of people have to realize is your desires are different from others. Your desires are placed in your heart, not theirs, and on your mind, not theirs. You have dreams that differs from theirs. So if you even say that you need that car,
Yeah.
I won't contest it. That may fulfill you. That may fulfill you, and it's like, okay, you know what? Go get it. And
Yeah.
for someone else, they may say, "Oh, you don't need that car." No, you don't need that car. So this is
I
a
need that
small,
car, but you don't need that car.
right. So it's everyone has different level of desires for different things, and I just try to help people to convert those fooling desires, into something that's meaningful.
Yeah. It's interesting because the word desire is very different than the word want. I mean, we say want a lot as though we just desire something,
Hmm.
but it's interesting because I was on a podcast a number of years ago and somebody made a comment about this word and I looked it up. And want, if you think about it, we use it in the context sometimes of like he wants for nothing, she wants for nothing. What does that mean? She lacks for nothing, he lacks for nothing. So want is like lacking. It's implying there's a lack and there's a gap. And
Right.
there may be a gap, but wanting and focusing on the lack, you were talking about focus earlier. It's like, what are we focusing? Are we focusing on the thing that we desire or the thing that we want to avoid and eliminate? And so when we talk about desire, desire is to be excited for something. And so this idea of being, and the Bible talks about it, God gives us the desires of our heart, not the wants,
Exactly.
but the
Exactly.
desires of our heart. And so when you said about watching our words, I think that's so important. It's like,
Mhm.
words create our world,
It's life
and
and death.
so
It's
yeah,
life and death in the power of the tongue. It's serious.
amen. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, and then the need, of course, is like you said, it's a higher level. And when people say, you don't need that, or people even say to me, they say, I want this, or I need this. I often will ask them and saying, if I'm coaching them, well, why?
Mhm.
Because sometimes they want that car because it's going to make them look good or whatever the case
Right.
is.
Mhm.
And just even them understanding the why helps them
That's key.
to
Yep.
understand,
Yep.
is this something that I really desire, or is it something that I want just because somebody told me I should want it?
Right.
So yeah,
That's big.
good stuff. It's good stuff. Well, thank you. I really appreciate it, Joel, you sharing a little bit here. There's so much that we could talk about. I was going through your
Right.
book. I'm
Right.
like, oh, let's talk about this. Let's talk about that. There's just so
Mhm.
much that we could cover that you have packed into your book. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that would be important to share before we wrap up?
Again, I'm big on, and I would like to hear your viewpoint, just happiness, fulfillment. I was just talking to someone yesterday about it, and I've spoken on it before, but just I don't pursue happiness any longer. I'm big on not having that be a part of my framework when I'm laying out plans for myself, when I'm brainstorming. It's not about being happy about that that moment or anything, to be honest. I'm always choosing to see what can keep me involved in a process, because happiness, I feel like, is always that pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. It's like you're
Yeah.
pursuing it almost forever. And it has made me, I'm not wanting to give up, but it's made me want to give up sometimes.
Mm.
The temptation, because I'm pursuing happiness, in many ways. And it's probably because we've been conditioned to hear pursue happiness, pursue happiness. I had to get rid of it. And the moment I had to break that down and start pursuing fulfillment, that's what did it for me. That's what actually had me stay involved in the process and appreciate the process more than anything else, because it wasn't about happiness anymore. I wanted to be fulfilled. And, I can relate it to me waking up and training at 5 a.m. I'm not happy to do that at all, not one bit, but it's so fulfilling to know what it's doing for me that I do it again and again and again. So that's something to where I've done often at this point in time, and I just don't pursue happiness anymore.
Well, I love that. And it's actually a perfect segue into a guest that I'm going to have on this show in a couple of weeks. And he talks about the joy-filled life, finding true fulfillment. And there is a big difference between happiness and being joyful, right? Joy, I think the reason why, when you mentioned about you're always chasing it, is because happiness, isn't it? I mean, I don't know your experience, but my experience is it's kind of fleeting, right? Like I do this thing and then I'm happy, right? For a moment. But joy is something that I can be in the midst of anything. Like I can find my joy, kind of like Paul in the Bible, he talks about, I count it all as joy. He was in a prison when he wrote that.
Right.
And a lot of bad things were happening to him and had happened to him by world standards. And so, but he was like, I count it all as joy. And I've often thought about that. And it's like, what does that look like?
It's amazing.
What does joy even feel like? And there's such a peace and grace attached to it versus happiness being kind of like when you talk about the wants and the wishes. It's like something you're chasing after, and you have this expectation that euphoria is going to last all the time, but it's not. That's not life. That's not life. If you're, it's like we go from valleys to mountaintops, and it's up and down, and if you're not in a struggle, then just wait for a little bit, it'll come.
Right. Exactly. No, really.
Assuming you're moving forward, right? I mean, even
exactly.
if you're not, it'll also find you. But even as you're moving forward, we're talking about achievement and living a life of fulfillment. There are going to be struggles. It's like that was what I got from your book is, there's always going to be struggle, but it's how do you find the strength in the midst of the struggle? And interestingly enough, it does tie back to a scripture that says the joy of the Lord is our strength.
Absolutely.
And so we find that strength in the midst of the struggle because of the fact that it's actually rooted in the joy of doing what you love and going for what you desire. So very cool. Yeah.
I appreciate that for sure.
So where can people find you?
Well, I'm pretty heavy on social media, especially Instagram. I would say I'm more there more often than not. J Green PLT. That's JAY Green PLT. Same on TikTok as well. I just got on TikTok. People have been trying to get me on there for forever, it seems like. On Facebook, Joel Green Official, and also through my website, joelbgreen.com. So I'm big on engagement as well. So if anyone reaches out with anything that I can help with, you'll definitely hear right back from me.
Beautiful. Joel, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in. I highly encourage you to get a copy of Joel's book, Filtering, with a way to extract strength from the struggle. Go get a copy of it. It is available this week, and you can get on his website, and that'll link you to the whatever Amazon and wherever else you can get it. Highly encourage you. It's well worth your time reading that. And leaders of transformation take action. It's one thing to listen to podcasts. I've said this so many times in this show. It's like, it's one thing to listen to podcasts and absorb all this information, and that is great. But it's when you actually apply it, that's where the rubber meets the road. That's when things happen. And Joel has talked about that through this whole interview. It's about taking action. It's about awareness, about stopping and checking in. But then it's about doing something with what you learned. And so I encourage you to do that today and know that you can actually live a life of fulfillment and impact. And you can get beyond your struggle and your challenges that you're facing right now. The difficult times that you're facing right now are not going to last forever. And you can be a part of the solution. So I encourage you that. We'd love to hear your stories. You can go on leadersoftransformation.com and reach out to us there or through social media as well. We'd love to hear your stories and how this has impacted you. And if you like it, or you enjoyed it, please share it with a friend. There's a lot of people struggling right now that need a word of encouragement and some tools, some practical things that they can do to move forward. And so if you feel this will help them do that, then please share it with them. Again, we appreciate you. We thank you. And we look forward to seeing you in the next episode of Leaders of Transformation real soon.